Hello and welcome once again to episode 105 of Code Completion. We're a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri, and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So, while we weren't looking, a wild encounter, a public release occurred. This, I guess, took place instead of having a usual October event, right?
Yeah, kind of interesting how they did it, but they just kind of up and released a couple new iPads and a new Apple TV just out of nowhere. And I especially surprised because it's like one of the iPads is an iPad Pro. I can kind of see them doing that for like refreshing the base iPad, which is the other one. But when they were like, oh yeah, here's a brand new M2 iPad Pro, that took us all, I think, by surprise. So I definitely wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, I guess because it was more of like a spec bump, and we'll get into that, maybe they didn't feel like it deserved a full event. But it reminds me a lot, I guess a few years back, I don't know if you remember, they had like 5 days of Christmas kind of thing. Of like every day before the event, they were like, oh, we have a new thing of this. And then on Tuesday, it was like, oh, we have a brand new version of this. And then on Wednesday, it was, oh, by the way, this is also brand new. And they had a lot of fun, I think, doing that, but I don't know if it worked out in their favor or not. So they just decided, here's all three things today. And the first of the new three things is a brand new iPad. The iPad with no prefixes or suffixes is back. It's just the iPad. It's new.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool. So I guess one of the biggest things is that it has like the nice slim bezels like the rest of the iPad. So now we're officially done with the home button on iPads. I think that was the last one. It basically looks like an iPad Air does now. It still has Apple Pencil 1 support. It comes in some really nice kind of vibrant colors that remind me of like the iPhone 5C days. Kind of that pastel-y blue, pink, yellow, white. And I think that's it. I don't think there's a darker one.
Yep, just those four.
Yeah. It has the A14 Bionic, which is the same as, I think, previous gen iPad Air.
The new iPad Air is an A15. Right.
Yeah, okay. So I've got an iPad Air here that has the A14.
So it's it's an iPhone 12, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's got like the cool front camera. So you've got, I always forget what it's called.
It's got a cooler front camera. It's got a landscape front camera. And I think this is worth talking about it a little bit. I did not know that. Yeah, so this is the first time Apple is diverging. Ooh, Spencer is surprised. You see it here live reaction video. We're doing the YouTube thing right, it turns out. Now you just gotta scream like a maniac and blow out some levels. But yeah, this is the first time Apple is bringing a landscape camera to iPads. The most like normal way that most people use them is in landscape, I would say. It is not really a portrait device. Even the screen is mounted in landscape if you were to look at the subpixels and all that. It's kind of cool that it's finally getting a landscape camera, which is, I would say, where most people expect to look when they're dealing with the camera. I use my iPad for Zoom all the time, and it's really weird. I always have to put someone else's video over to the side, so that way I actively look at the camera. Otherwise, I am looking off into a direction and has nothing to do with where the camera actually is, and therefore I just look like I'm talking into the distance rather than talking to a person. So I think it's great that they're putting it in a place where eyes naturally look. It's just going to be a question whether they're going to bring that to the other iPads, right?
Yeah, I guess my follow-up is that a part of the new iPad Pro, or is it still on the top?
No, it's only on this new entry level iPad, which is not quite so entry level because the home the what's that called? The home button? I forgot. It's been so long since I've touched one. But the home button iPad is still available as the lowest price point. I think it starts at $329.
Yes,
I want to say.
Yeah.
So that's the absolute cheapest iPad you can get, and then this one is at $449.
$449.
$449. Thank you. And that's where this one is starting. So it's not the absolute cheapest, but it is definitely the entry level iPad. And then the iPad Air is the upgrade to this in terms of like regular use iPads. You're not using this as like a main computing device for any serious work. Not that many people do serious work on iPads, but people try. So we let them.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's kind of interesting now that there is the, original base model iPad with the home button. And then they've kind of like refreshed it with this, and it's sort of encroaching, I think, a little bit on the iPad Air, where, I mean, to me, the only real big difference is that the selling difference between me buying this or an iPad Air, if I had to choose, is that the iPad Air gets second generation Apple Pencil support, which means it's magnetic, and that is a world of change going from the first to second generation Apple Pencil. I don't actually lose it all the time. So that alone is, I think, the biggest differentiating factor, because this also has the keyboard folio. So, you've got a keyboard and trackpad and everything on this iPad as well. So there's I feel like the lineup is kind of getting a little bit crowded, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they made it really, really complicated all at once. Yeah. There is a better screen on the iPad Air as well, though like no one is going to pay attention to that when they're like purchasing this thing. So I think the keyboard folio, is it called a keyboard folio? Like, are you actually reading that? Because there are like 10 products named folios and keyboards and a mixture of both of those terms. So
yes, just making the Magic Keyboard Folio.
Magic Keyboard Folio. Okay. So this thing is really cool because one, it allows you to use your iPad in portrait if you really wanted to. Something that the Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pros don't allow you to do is to ever use it in portrait. You have to snap that iPad out of there. So that's one thing. Second thing, I heard it's about like a half a pound or a little bit more than a half a pound lighter than the Magic Keyboard. So it's going to make your iPad a lot less heavy in a dramatic way, because a half a pound for an iPad is a large amount percentage wise. Yeah. And then it includes a function key row on top, which means that you do get access to an escape key, which I never really thought I would use all that much, but it turns out I reach for it all the time whenever I'm typing anything in like Slack and wanting to get rid of the suggestions or whatnot. Escape keys are useful. Who'da thunk? And this keyboard has it. It also has a trackpad, I believe, right?
Yep.
So it is a very versatile kind of keyboard cover type thing that origamis out into a full keyboard experience. It's excellent that they're kind of exploring this. It's a bummer that it's relegated to the cheapest iPad now.
Yeah.
But that's how things are, right?
Yeah, I think my thinking with that, with both this new folio, which I think is actually really cool, the way that it kind of folds out, as well as, like you mentioned, that landscape-facing camera is probably just a test on these iPads to see how it goes on the cheapest ones. And I wouldn't be surprised if the landscape camera comes to all iPads like in the next refresh. That's huge. I mean, I very rarely will use my iPad in portrait mode. So,
that makes sense. And then the Apple Pencil, which is another really like curious decision that they made. They decided to go with the first generation Apple Pencil, which is the ancient generation Apple Pencil, the one that Apple decided it's a great way for you to be able to always keep it charged, is that you can just plug it into the port on the iPad, and therefore you have something easily karate choppable, is the way I like to put it. It's going to be very easy for you to damage both your iPad and your Apple Pencil with this very fragile thing sticking out of its only port.
Wait, it's now USB-C, and so they include you have to buy a $9 dongle to go from Lightning to USB-C.
Yeah, if you already have an Apple Pencil 1, you have to buy a dongle. That's $9. If you do not have an Apple Pencil 1 yet, and you buy an Apple Pencil 1, it now comes with the dongle.
Oh, okay,
okay. So you have to remember to keep this dongle on you. I remember there's a similar dongle to, like, give it the ability to plug into a regular lightning cable because it had the male connector. So I think it's something very similar here, right? Is the dongle like a USB-C male, or is it a USB-C female? It's probably something ridiculous. So.
Oh yeah,
whatever.
It's
probably kind of extra ridiculous.
Kind of unrelated, but I saw a tweet. I forgot to grab it. We'll find it. But it was like a guy that posted a picture, and the caption was, "I found the best way to charge the Apple Pencil, and it was into the bottom of a magic mouse." I don't know if it would actually charge it, but it just looked ridiculous.
I mean, you can plug that thing into all sorts of things. You can put your AirPods onto the Apple Pencil, and then you have like this really cool eraser head, which is what all the kids were into back in the days of like putting erasers on your pencils.
Yeah, that was way back in the day.
Yeah, I don't know what kids do nowadays. Side thing. Apparently, like a lot of schools in Japan banned erasers because kids were like showing off all their cool erasers, and that was like making evident class inequality in a classroom setting, and they were like not okay with that. So yeah, erasers got banned from a lot of Japanese schools because not the ones you put on pencils. These are just cool erasers. Because Japan has cool erasers. I don't know if you've ever gone to a Japanese stationery store. They're like anything you can imagine, there's an eraser of that object. So yeah, that's just something that exists. So yeah, that's the new iPad. Anything else that we missed? I don't think so.
I don't think so. No,
it's available soon.
Yeah. 5G. It's got 5G.
Does it have 5G? 6 by Verizon?
It can. Yeah.
Cool.
That I think it starts at like $600 then if you get the cellular model. But like that front camera does the whatever center stage and stuff. So there's some good improvements for sure. I think it still only has one back camera and everything. But yeah, I mean, it's good. I think
it still has a SIM card too. So unlike the iPhone, it kept the SIM card.
Yeah, very well could. I didn't check that. So yeah.
Yeah, but then you said it has Wi-Fi 6 or 6E?
Yeah, just 6.
Just 6, okay. So that means that the upcoming iPad Pro is the first device that Apple is shipping that has Wi-Fi 6E then?
I believe so, yes.
So transitioning rapidly into the new iPad Pro. There's a new iPad Pro, and it has Wi-Fi 6E, which you might be wondering, what is up with Wi-Fi 6 versus Wi-Fi 6E? The E in Wi-Fi 6E stands for 6 gigahertz. That's about it. So that means you have a whole lot more bandwidth. You can probably get more than gigabit speeds in practical use, which is really cool if you have a Wi-Fi 6E router, which most people don't. So that's something to look forward to in the future. But until then, the iPad will be the fastest Wi-Fi device that you may or may not own. Though it might not actually be the fastest one because it's still a 2x2 radio, not a 4x4.
Yeah, I think
so that means that like the bandwidth is not as fast as it could be.
Yep, but pretty dang fast.
Yeah, so that's the only upgrade to the iPad Pro. So kind of boring.
No. No. Well, actually, it has the M2, which I'm actually very interested to see the thermals on because I know that people have had talked about issues with even the MacBook Air, which probably has a larger chassis and thermal kind of capacity overheating. So obviously you're probably not going to push an iPad Pro as hard, but there's the option of
I guess for the small boost of speed, then that's noticeably faster, right? If you're doing anything long-winded, then the battery's probably going to like warm up too and then give decreased power voltage to the processor, and everything's going to get like be in a bad state at that point in time. So you're not really using these devices to do long, heavy work. Work as in computational work. You can probably get work done. It's just not going to be like, oh, now compiling something for 2 hours.
Yeah, right. So I think probably the biggest thing with this is they've added hover support to the Apple Pencil, kind of like, I know that Wacom tablets used to have it back in the day, or I guess they still exist.
They still have it, yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I don't know anyone that uses them anymore. But the ability to hover and kind of see where the pencil is before it's on the screen. And I don't know if there are kind of extra features along with that hover support, but I also haven't looked into it. Have you seen anything else?
No, I did not dig into the API, but to give anyone an idea of like why this might be useful, is imagine you are in some painting software, right? Something where you can do some digital painting. It becomes tremendously useful when you do not have a brush in your hand to know like how the brush is going to interact with the screen once you lay it down. And this is something that anyone who's used a brush before will know is like it matters very much how you get the point touching first and then you push the rest of the brush stroke into it. You're going to get a very different shape. You're going to get a very different amount of ink going onto the page and stuff like that. So up until now, software has just kind of had to rely on the fact that you start touching the surface and then you press harder. Whereas this gives you an extra amount of leeway to that dimension where before you even touch the surface, you can go ahead and start interacting with whatever you're going to be drawing or using the pencil with. And then the software can kind of use that information to build up the stroke that it's going to do once you do touch it. So you can do some very interesting things as a result of this if you do write like drawing software. Or you can do the bare minimum, which is to just show like, hey, you're about to draw here, which like is useful but not super useful because like, yeah, you know you're about to draw there. You put the thing down there. So like that's the bare minimum that you could do. But the more useful thing that you can do is like give a preview in terms of like how big of a stroke is going to happen, or use that information to construct a hypothetical brush stroke where you are like turning the bristles before they even touch down on the paper and stuff like that. So there's a lot of usefulness that can come about from this. It just depends on people like taking advantage of that.
Yeah, in one of their promotional videos, I don't know, I can't remember which one, but it did show things like Dimitri said with showing a preview of, you know, the brush stroke and everything, make sure you get in the right place and everything. And I think as well, I can't remember where I read it. I think it was a couple days ago when it was announced. But it doesn't just know proximity to the screen, but it also knows things like tilt and all of that, which is what Dimitri's saying, that you can get that brush stroke, perfect right before you even start. So that's really cool. Not just having it be like a proximity sensor, but relaying all of the normal information that the Apple Pencil does as far as, I can't remember what it's called, like azimuth or whatever, or I don't know. It's been a hot minute since I looked at that API, but tilt and all that stuff. And so, yeah, really cool.
I think it works at a fair distance away. So 12 millimeters, I think, is what people were throwing around, which is about like more than half an inch, or just about half an inch, I would say. That's like 2.5, right? So yeah, just about half an inch away from the surface of the screen, it will start to register it. And of course, the closer you get, the more accurate it can be in terms of finding out exactly like where you're going to touch down. And the best part, it does not require a new Apple Pencil. So if you already have an Apple Pencil 2, that will just work with this, which is quite surprising.
Yeah, we were speculating about that, and Ben mentioned that it's probably just a new I forgot what he said. Not digitizer.
A digitizer.
Oh, was it a digitizer? Oh,
I think that's what it is on the screen.
Yeah. So super cool. And along with this new iPad, not that it's specific to the new iPad, but they're touting external monitor support, Stage Manager, and all that. So be interesting to see how that is. I haven't really kept up on the improvements to the experience. I know that at first, it was in the first betas, it was really bad. And
I don't think the external monitor support is available yet. Like that's going to be turned on later. And we're just getting like base Stage Manager
gotcha.
At this point in time.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So as of this episode comes out, as we record, it's not out yet, but as of this episode coming out, iPad OS 16 will have come out as of as will iOS 16.1 and macOS 13 Ventura. Are we at 13? I don't know. They got so confusing with the numbers. I was keeping up, and then we hit 16, and 16 was actually 11. Yeah, 16 was 11, and then we had 12, and now we're at 13. Okay, I got it. I got this. We're at macOS 18. Can you imagine if people still counted that way?
Yeah, that'd be bad.
So it's all coming out Monday. Long story short. And you'll be able to start playing around with all this, which is cool and exciting. I actually put in an order for an iPad, and I got mine early. And by early, I mean I got the Magic Keyboard they bought with it early.
So I was gonna say it's not supposed to be out until Wednesday.
Yeah, so mine should come on Wednesday, so I can talk about it then. In the meantime, I did get the white Magic Keyboard because I already have a black one. And this one is like falling apart, fraying at the edges. So like, I'm not going to be using that on a new iPad. For like, I was hoping it would last, but I guess 3 years was its maximum survivability for that. But yeah, this one is the same one that was being sold. So there's nothing new about it. No function key row. No like portrait use. It's still kind of awkward. It kind of holds itself up on the floor, which is kind of neat when it's open. So that kind of works for portrait use, but it's not really made for it. And I did see some people like mention like, hey, iPad Pro, why don't we have the landscape camera on that thing? That's the pro use. Like, heck, dude. This does not work in portrait, right? This was only in landscape. Exactly. Why do I need to look over here instead of looking right in the middle there? So it turns out that it might be more difficult than we think to get both a camera and the Apple Pencil magnetic holder / communication thingy-majig in that same amount of space. Because Apple has to have everything be symmetric. Of course, the sensors are all in the center of the Apple Pencil, and the Apple Pencil has to be center aligned with the iPad, and the iPad is center aligned with the camera, and therefore all of this kind of is stuck in the same spot. So that's probably why we don't have Apple Pencil 2 support on the regular brand new iPad, and why we do not have a landscape camera on the new iPad Pro.
Not to mention there's also the Face ID sensor array that they've got to fit there as well.
Oh yeah, it's even bigger.
Than just one camera. Yeah.
So that's probably why none of that is kind of aligning this year. Maybe they could have like put the magnets like on the side of the camera, and you have two magnets, because I don't know if you've ever played with it. You can like spin the pencil around on the center there, which is okay, but it's not optimal. But then that would require a new pencil because all the pencil hardware is in the middle. So I could see Apple have been saying like, hey, we can have an Apple Pencil 3. This is a great moment for it. We have this new digitizer thing. That would have been perfect, I think. But I guess Apple decided not to go down that route. Maybe they have a ton, like a literal stockpile of Apple Pencil 2s that they still need to get through. Who knows?
Could be.
Like maybe they just did one production run and they like are still selling them. I hope that's not the case because batteries. Like who knows what reasons they chose to go with, but that might be the reason why we don't have it this year. So maybe next year look forward to probably more cameras and stuff all at once, like camera moving and then new Apple Pencil to like make room for that, or maybe the cameras get smaller, maybe the cameras move down into the screen for no reason. Who knows what's gonna happen?
Yeah, interesting. And then finally we have the new Apple TV 4K, which I am so sad about because I just bought a second Apple TV 4K like a couple months ago.
Oh no.
I'm like, dude, they're not gonna release another one. They just refreshed it. Like what? Oh.
Okay, so they did do some good things with this. They did finally dump the Apple TV HD. That's no longer a thing. They did increase the chip to the latest and greatest A15.
A15,
which, like, I would say that's reasonable. That's what some of the current... Are some of the current iPhones on the A15? No, they're on the A16, but but the A16 is the same thing as an A15.
Oh yeah, that was so it'd be the 13 Pro or the iPhone 14.
Anyways, it's basically an M1. That's long story short. It's a great performance. So like no one's going to complain here. I better not see any like laggy manipulation of the remote on this new Apple TV. That's for sure. But it dropped down in price, so it's like $129 now. So it's the most affordable an Apple TV has basically ever been. And that gets you the 32 gig model without an Ethernet jack and without thread support. So this is basically a spec bumps, but also a minor downgrade of the old Apple TV 4K. No fan, and it's kind of smaller, right? And then for slightly more, I have no idea how much more, you do get that Ethernet jack back, and you get 128 gigabytes of onboard storage. So that way you can download all the screensavers. Like you finally have room for that.
That's about the only reason for the storage.
Yeah, I don't really know what else the storage is used for. I guess games if you download that. And you get the thread radio in there. And if you're wondering what on earth thread is, it's basically IPv6 dedicated radio that does not require like an internet backhaul. It just, hey, everything is going to multicast to everything else, and everything will just work because we have infinite addresses now. That's the basic idea. It's probably more complicated than that, but that's what I'm going for this. So yeah, new Apple TV 4K. It's basically a spec bump. Unless you felt that your Apple TV was slow in some regard, probably not really worth changing it. It's probably like just the same. You just know that this means that next year all the UI and interaction is going to be totally revamped to take advantage of this newfound power and make the A13 Apple TV 4K very slow as a result. Probably not. But yeah, it's new.
Yeah.
There's also the new Apple Siri remote, and this has a big change, and that is it no longer has a Lightning port. It's a USB-C port now.
Is it really? I did not see that. Oh, it is indeed. Man. And that was half the reason I bought another Apple TV is so I could have one of these, dude.
It's an $80 remote.
I know.
I have a question for you. Do you get the play and pause buttons constantly like mixed up when you're not looking at the remote? Like you try playing or pausing something and you press mute or you press menu instead.
I don't.
I do it all the time. It drives me insane. So
I just know it's the second one from the bottom.
I am deeply hoping that Apple adds some sort of marks or something that can help in that regard, because it's very, very hard for me to like press the right button sometimes. I don't know why. I should be able to feel this, but I think they flipped them at one point. Maybe my brain is confused. I think
they did. Yeah. It'd be nice if it had like backlit buttons.
Well, I'm not even looking at it. Like I feel like if they indented the buttons with like the play button and then like a mute, I think that would do most of what I need from it. Though probably someone's fingertips are gonna grind away.
Those off.
Like this the Touch ID, what that's sensing all those ridges on your fingers. Well, those are also little mini sandpaper filers for buttons and keyboards and stuff. It turns out. Maybe that's why they didn't do that. Who knows?
Yeah, I randomly I looked at my my car stereo, and it's like an aftermarket one because my car's freaking old. But I noticed that the volume wheel, all of the silver finish is coming off on the edges. I was like, oh shoot, dude! Like,
oh no.
Yeah, so it happens for sure.
Have you been collecting that silver? You can probably remine it.
It's not silver.
Refine it.
Some cheap paint. That's all.
Oh darn.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask. I think so with the thread support. That's like also helping with, like the Matter smart home stuff. Is that right? That's the reason that I'm kind of thinking like, oh crap, I kind of want to upgrade because I have HomeKit stuff, but I'm sure that with this Matter, whatever collaboration, that there will be a bunch of new smart home stuff that's going to be, better in many, many ways. So I'm kind of thinking,
do you have any HomePod minis?
Yeah.
Then those have it as well.
Oh, it has the Thread radio? Mm-hmm. Yes, you just saved me from buying an Apple TV. Cool.
Yeah, great. I have no idea how it's going to all work at the end of the day, but both HomePods and Apple TVs act as home hubs, whatever they're called. Yeah. And that's basically a Bluetooth to Wi-Fi relay station for all intents and purposes. So it seems like Thread is going to be the replacement for the Bluetooth part of the equation. And the Wi-Fi part of the equation. So that way things won't need to have like Wi-Fi. They can just have Thread and hope for at least one hub in whatever home they end up, whether that's an Alexa or an Apple TV or a HomePod or a Google Home, Nest. I think it's called. Nest.
I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. If you have one of these things that also has power and therefore a Wi-Fi connection, then that can be like the relay. For all those things. Okay. And all those things will have real internet addresses because it's all using IPv6. And I think Thread mandates that everything has an encrypted connection as well as like the basics of internet protocol, which is not mandated by IPv6. It got jettisoned at the last moment. Otherwise, we would have had like TLS on everything by default, which would have been really neat. But that's not the world we live in. So, Apple TV, basically a spec bump. But I think it's good that Apple is doing spec bumps. They used to do spec bumps all the time, like multiple times a year. It's like, hey, we're just updating this thing again because new stuff came out. So I don't know if this means like the chip shortage is finally like getting less crazy. Like for whatever it's worth, Ubiquiti finally has like stuff in their store in like stock, which also probably means that the chip shortage is getting less crazy. Because for the longest time it's like, hey, we have all this stuff, none of it is available for sale. It's all sold out. So we'll see how that all works out.
Yeah, I'd assume that things are getting a lot better. Like you can actually buy like GPUs for a PC now, which was not the case for almost like 3 years there. So
yeah, it probably also helps that crypto crashed.
Yeah,
but that's like a whole separate.
Crypto crashed, and then Ethereum finally merged, so they're not mining on that. So that's good. Sweet. The world is healing.
The world is healing. And that leads us to our next topic, and that is that Swift might be getting macros soon. So on the Swift forums, Douglas Greger, who is one of the main maintainers of Swift, shared that he and the team are looking for ways that macros can fit in the Swift language. And for those of you who don't know what a macro is, it's basically a way for you to write code that will generate code in your file. And this is great for boilerplate. So if you know that you are going to have your code run or need to call a very specific set of instructions just with a different variable name 4 times in a row, you can write a macro for that first time, and it will you just call that macro 4 times and it will generate the code rather than call a function. So this is like one level away from actually running your code on something. You're generating it in advance to do something useful, usually to remove boilerplate and to make the programming experience a lot better. And adding macros to Swift can be like a double-edged sword. It can either really help in a lot of distinct ways. Like for instance, in the standard library, there's int 8 and 16 and 32 and 64. And they're all identical other than the amount of bits. And therefore, there's one implementation for all of those. And I think they use like gem files or whatever, GYB, whatever those stand for. But it's basically a Python library that will go and generate 4 different files at all these different bits that will do the same thing for all of them. So macros can help take care of that as well. Another place where macros can help is like Codable. We are all used to Codable just magically working. Guess what? The compiler is writing code on your behalf to make Codable work. And it does that before it actually parses the rest of your code. It just says like, hey, it looks like you have these properties. Let me write an initializer with these properties. So what they're looking forward to is being able to take all these bits that are currently sequestered away in the compiler, like equatable, hashable, codable, all these magic pieces, and make them less magic, make them just macros that like a protocol can say, hey, you get equality, and this is a macro, and it will look at all the properties in your type and infer what the method should actually look like based on that, and it will run in a separate module to actually generate that code for you that can actually be read. So that's what they're looking forward to, but they don't want it to end up in the same situation as C, where like a macro can hijack everything and like cause complete chaos if done wrong, and it's like super cryptic to write them. You have to like really know yet another programming language, the preprocessor compiler, I think that's what's called, the C preprocessor. So yeah, it's been a hot minute since I've last touched any of those things, but yeah, there'll be dragons for sure.
Yeah, okay. I mentioned to Dimitri before the show, like, I don't, I get, well, your explanation cleared up a couple things, but I mentioned to him I didn't really understand, like, the purpose of this. And I guess, taking the onus away from the compiler kind of magically doing things to it actually just generating code. That's cool. So I guess it is like in a stage before it gets compiled, it gets generated. Kind of, I mean, I guess kind of like core data classes in a sense. Okay.
Yeah, you get that like pre-generated type, right? So I'm not sure like there is the Swift plugins, the Swift Package Manager plugins, which I'd say the core data kind of fits in that realm a little bit more. But you can also think of like asserts or something we used to use macros for, because asserts could go ahead and use your like whatever code you wrote in the assert, it would print that out with the assert. Like it just magically knew you were trying to do A plus B minus C. Like with those variable names exactly as you typed it. And that's because it took whatever you typed in there and you thought you were calling a function, you were actually just calling a macro that would take that string and put in a log and also take that string and evaluate it. So do both of those things. Another very common one is localized string. That is also a macro that would expand out to something. Though in Swift they just wrote like a helper function that would expand it out. But as a macro, it can do a whole lot more useful things. It can know exactly what arguments are being passed and do stuff with that.
Yeah, okay. So I think that's like the crux of it, is like my thinking was like, what is the difference between having this and like having a function? And I guess it's just like the macro can be a little bit more dynamic in what it does, I guess.
Yeah, and they were looking at other cases of like how to make this a real Swift thing. Like, let's not just build macros. Let's build whatever the next stage further than macros is. And they were looking at like an example of a member-wise init. A member-wise init has to know what types are part of the like what members are part of the type you're writing an initializer for, right? It has to know how many variables there are, what types those variables are, if those types support like default values and initializers, and like what those default values should be, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very complex problem at the end of the day. It's not something you can just write a function for, right? Sure. You want code to be generated to have that initializer in there. And what they're proposing is, hey, you can just write pound sign member-wise init, and that will figure that out. It knows from context you're in this type, it has these properties, and it has access to that tree. In fact, they gave an example, like the whole reason why this is part of a different module that you would write these macros in is because you have access to all the pieces of Swift they've been building in Swift, like the compiler itself that they've been rewriting in Swift. You have access to that. So you have access to the whole tree, you have access to the parsing, you have access to like the contexts, And at several different stages of the compiler as well. You can have access to inference of types as well. So some parts may be something that can be syntax highlighted. Other parts might be something that are just evaluated when you finally compile. But the Swift compiler can help your macro along the way be correct, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just generating a string and then having that string be code.
Okay, so like in that example of generating the member-wise initializer, it's like introspecting the class or the struct or whatever and figuring all that out. Okay.
Yeah, at compile time. So then you end up with a super like very precise member-wise initializer that would just do what it needs to do and nothing else.
So cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I read his initial kind of walkthrough of the proposal. I didn't read any more than like one or two comments. So where is this at? Is this like pretty early? Like you mentioned, they're kind of still trying to figure out the direction. So this isn't anything that would be like in Swift 6 or 7, probably.
I would say this is probably something that may come as a part of the Swift 5 like round of things, like 5.10 or whatever. Cool. But it is something that will probably come in sooner rather than later. Right now they're fielding, hey, if you write a library, what kind of features would you really like for this? And some have already pointed out like, hey, we would really like the ability to wrap functions. Like say, hey, you have a function. I want to wrap it entirely as a whole with some other code so that way we can trace it, we can do all sorts of things, especially useful in Swift on the server because that's a very common pattern. Like, hey, I want my function before it's called to authenticate first. So, like, perfect. This can be something that can write that authentication bit in a very strategic way. Cool. Yeah. And once again, this happens at compile time, so you don't lose any runtime performance for any of this. So that's the major benefit to these macros. And they do things that would otherwise be impossible because you're working as a programmer, right? You're taking the job of the programmer to add extra abilities to the code that's being written. And that's where macros can be super powerful. It's basically hijacking the rest of the bits of the language that were previously impossible to hijack. Like, long story short. So this has to be done very carefully, obviously. You can end up with not to mention the security risks, but just the confusion, the complication. Like, you don't want everyone just writing macros here and there for simple things. You want main library writers to like build stuff that they're going to use in their library, and that's basically all you want those macros to be able to do, and never really expose them to users other than letting users write their own, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of going back to my thing of like, why isn't this just like a variable or a function? I saw some examples of macros that were just like renaming things, right? You like pound define something to be like something shorter of, so in that sense I was like, I don't really get it, but with a lot of this like generative stuff, that makes a little bit more sense. So
super cool. Another really common example is like, take a static array. A static array has a fixed number of elements. You would need to write a very specialized type that has like an internal tuple of those 16 or 17 elements if you really wanted to. And that is not at all like practical to write if you were like, oh, it would be really nice about 19 here and 17 here. So you can write a macro that can help synthesize that code. And then you don't really have to care however many times you need to call it. It would just write the correct thing for you.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, yay. Looking forward to macros taking over the language and only being used in libraries, because once again, it gets really confusing once other people start to like make use of them. But yeah, I think it would be a good thing to have.
Yeah, that sounds like a genuine need, I guess. Like, I think we're getting there are a lot of things that are just like, they feel good and complete, but that Now that you mention it, I'm like, oh yeah, that seems like a cool, like necessary addition. That would be nice.
I can also see it really cool if I don't know if anyone's discussed this yet, but this is just like off the top of my head. If whatever macros you do use, if you can choose to expand them then and there, then you can have access to the code that it generated, and use that as a starting point to do something else. So maybe you use a macro to generate a bunch of code, and then you're like, okay, now it's time for me to customize this. And then you can go ahead and do that, write an Xcode, like let the macro generate the code, and then before even compiling it you let it compile. But before actually running the code, you can turn it into code that you can then modify further and do whatever specific thing you need. Like, for instance, I do know that you can, if you know where to look, get to the equatable implementations that the compiler will synthesize for you. Like, those are just files at the end of the day that get written, that get included with your compiled result. So that is something that I feel like if at the tool level it becomes available would be really useful for everyone, because then you could use the macro one time basically to do what you need to do, and then you're in a good spot.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yep. That's the tweet.
That's the tweet.
And finally on our list of new things this week is Apple announced that they're starting a savings account program. So along with your Apple Card, you can get an Apple savings account with no fees, all the great stuff that Apple has touted for Apple Card. I don't think they mentioned any, like, what the interest rate will be. But yeah, it's a savings account. Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what to
say.
They
mentioned, I think, like, their big thing is you can just have it directly put in the whatever the daily savings or whatever it's called from your Apple Card. When you spend money, you get 1%, 2%, or 3% cash back, and it can just automatically get put in that savings account, so it'll just grow that way. So, and I think I read you can also, like, connect a bank account to deposit money in there. I don't know if, like, they'll add it so it has its own number and you could, like, direct deposit your paycheck in there or something. I don't know. I didn't really look into it too much, but kind of cool.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of what Simple was doing. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They basically tried to modernize the whole banking system. So they partnered with a bank, and they basically took care of the entire experience that someone, like, would end up using, and they built a really nice product around that. At the end of the day, they ended up getting bought and shut down. And long story short, it didn't last. But this feels like something that Apple has the resources to actually do, and they clearly have the financial resources to pull something like this off. So they're still working with Goldman Sachs. Is that the correct word? To actually do this. But yeah, it's going to be a thing. Not yet, I don't think, right? I think it's coming with 16.1.
Yeah, I didn't actually read when it was coming, but fairly soon. Not as exciting as macros, man.
I know, and definitely not as exciting as the new iPad. Colors. They brought colors back.
We're getting there.
Real colors. They're listening to us, just not in the right place. Just bring colors to pro products. People who are pros, they want to, like, go at it in yellow. They want to be a yellow pro, or an orange pro, like, or a blue pro.
Yeah,
like, everyone wants to be bold.
Give me the blue colors, you cowards.
There are multiple shades, Apple.
I know.
Anyways, this week's episode of Code Completion is once again brought to you by Bon Voyage. Bon Voyage is a full-stack iOS application development course from Johnny B. With this course, you'll learn how to build both a full iOS client app and an associated React web administration application. The app and the site will integrate with Firebase, as well as Stripe and Plaid for payment processing. Bon Voyage is a place to book extravagant vacations, and you'll gain the skills to build the iOS app from the ground up and integrate anything and everything you need to provide a world-class vacation booking experience. To find out more and to sign up for the course, visit bonvoyage.app/course. That's bon-voyage.app/course. That's bonvoyage.app/course. And be sure to follow Bon Voyage's instructor, Johnny B. Codes. That's at JONNYBCODES on Twitter to stay up to date with all his courses. Thanks again to Bon Voyage e-commerce app course for sponsoring Code Completion. Now's the time that we share our weekly code completion tip. And I have a SwiftUI tip for everyone this week. Nice. And that is .frame. So .frame, you might be wondering, like, that's like a standard one. You can set the width, you can set the height on something. But the specific incantation that I want to share, and I really call it incantation because it feels like we're wielding magic whenever we use all these different pieces here, is .frame with a max width or a max height of .infinity. And you might be wondering, well, like, that ain't useful. Like, infinite size is not going to be displayable. But what this does is allow you to have a container, say an HStack or a VStack, use the full width or the full height available to it. It's not going to use infinity. It's just saying, hey, your max is infinity. So use up to that is possible. So if you remember from SwiftUI, the parent kind of tells the child how much space is available, and the child tells the parent how much it wants to use. So without this, your HStack or your VStack may say, hey, I only want to use this much. And that's not really all the space that's available. So this frame really helps it take up as much space as it needs to. And this is a great alternative to like not really knowing what you're doing, like I was, and just put like color.clear inside of a ZStack. Yep. And now your ZStack takes up everything, and you're like, finally, just what I wanted. Just what I needed all this time is just put color.clear and everything. So instead of putting color.clear and everything, you can totally use .frame with a max width and a max height of .infinity to get that same ability in each dimension.
So it's like a spring.
Basically.
A spring, right?
Not just. It's like a power-loaded spring that just wants to push. It wants to push along the edges. So if we think about it in terms of auto layout, we have the content hugging and the compression resistance. Mm-hmm. This would be I don't know.
Like a compression resistance of 1,000.
Yeah, it basically wants to just like take up all the amount of space, basically.
But it would only do that to its parent, right? It wouldn't go past the parent's parent or whatever.
Yeah, unless the parent was also ambiguous, and then it would kind of help inform that down the chain. But if the children were like, hey, I want to be small, then this is like the way out of that box where you can tell them to take up as much room as you need them to take up. This is a great way of getting things to be equal size as well. Like if you need two buttons to take up the same amount of space, you can give both of them that .infinity, and they'll divide the space between them, but they'll use up all the space.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Fun wizardry from SwiftUI.
Yes. Sometimes does feel like black magic. The grid system isn't out yet, right? Or is it?
It should be out.
I haven't used SwiftUI in a while. Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't either. I've been stuck in UIKit land, and like it's not fun. I very much enjoy SwiftUI over that. So as soon as we can finally migrate away from UIKit, I am going to be very, very happy.
Nice. Yeah, it'll be good.
So in terms of our mini review corner, I heard that you finally got your phone. It's been a hot minute since we've had a chance to discuss both our thoughts on it.
Yes.
So, yes, Spencer, do share. What do you love about your iPhone 14 Pro?
It's an iPhone. I don't know.
Do you make calls with it?
You know what? I don't. I will FaceTime my parents on occasion. Actually, my mom, because my dad has an Android phone. He's the only one in the family, and we shun him for it, and he rebels harder, so I think he will never get a phone. I have told him on his, in his casket when he is dead, I will place an iPhone for him, just to spite him. I love my dad, but I know. No, it's good. I think it feels the same. I think the dynamic island is really cool, and I've quite enjoyed the small, just the small things that have come from it. It's cool to see music playing there, and you get the waveform and everything. You see when, like the microphone was used, and you get that little yellow dot, and it's pretty visible. You don't have to go into the control center to see that. But other than that, it feels, just exactly like my old phone. Going from a 13 Pro to a 14 Pro is a huge difference. Battery life seems really good though. My phone is mostly charging. I just have it on a wireless charger at my desk, so I don't charge it at night or anything. But I have noticed that when I'm out, it does seem to last a fair amount longer. Partially, I'd say, just to a new, attribute it to it being a new battery, but also there's higher capacity there. So it's good. I'm a little off put by, I got the silver model, and so like the bezels are actually silver, and I'm not used to seeing that. That I guess like vibrant.
Because you got the Sierra, I think it was called last year, right? Which is the blue one, and that was a little darker.
Yeah, it was definitely like the back was quite light, but the surgical steel was quite dark compared to like this silver. So, but it's good. It's no complaints for sure. I think the dynamic island is the big thing, and also the cameras are sweet. Having it take like 80-90 megabyte photos is pretty cool, and being able to zoom in quite a bit. I think it was the camera upgrade was long needed and very welcome for me.
Are you using the always on display?
No. I don't like it. No, I've turned it off on my new watch and on the new phone as well, especially because I have my phone sitting right under my monitor. It's just distracting, and it'll come on when I get a notification. That's good enough for me. I don't know if it's old school, but
so I've had mine on for like the past few weeks. So I've learned one thing that I do not appreciate about it at all is I don't know when it's in its always on mode or it's in its active mode. So I'll see the notifications that are down at the bottom, and I try to swipe up, and swiping up does nothing.
Oh.
You have to tap first and then swipe up. So I find myself swiping up like 3 or 4 times, like I'm doing it right now, and there's absolutely no response on the screen, which makes sense. Like it might be in like a pocket, or I don't know. Actually, no, it does not make sense. Just let me swipe up. Like wake up the phone in that like one gesture, or do something that makes sense. Because that does not make sense. That drives me nuts.
Interesting. I would have thought that like when you get a notification or something, it would turn on like the Face ID array or something, and then like realize you're looking at it. I don't know.
Well, I think this is more like not when I get the notification, but when I notice, oh hey, there's a notification that's like in the little pile at the bottom. So I'm like, I want to see it. So I try swiping it, and nothing happens. Oh, swiping from the bottom does bring up Face ID. So what I meant was swiping like midway on the screen, just to, like scroll the notifications up. That's the one that does not work. So, yeah, that's my only complaint about the always on. Otherwise, I think it's fine. I think it's useful. Like I obviously am like glancing at it. I'm like, oh, I want to see what that notification is, and just like I can't. So I feel like it's broken in that regard. But yeah, generally I think it's a pretty neat feature. I haven't really noticed any battery like problems because of it, though I have heard a ton of people did have like iPhone 14 like battery woes, and they're like, hey, iPhone 13 was like way better for me, like despite its older battery. So it was interesting that you said like it's been way better for you. So
perhaps
I guess it's a hit or miss.
Perhaps it is because I'm not using the always on display, and
maybe
it doesn't have to use that extra battery. Although I'd assume that with it one being OLED and pretty low brightness, and probably putting it down to like 1 hertz refresh rate or something. Still, I mean, yeah, I don't know. That's interesting.
Comment number 2 about the 1 hertz refresh rate. You'd think with a timer and 1 hertz, that would be enough to show the timer ticking down, right? You have 4 minutes and 56, 55, 54 seconds, etc. No, it says 4 minutes and dash dash. It doesn't even like hide the numbers and just say like 4 min. It's just 4 : dash dash. And I think that's like the weirdest decision that they've ever made. Like talking about like weird things, I'm like noticing. I'm like, why did the seconds disappear? One, and why did it get replaced with dash dash? Like if you're gonna do that, just hide the colon and the dash dash and put like min, and that would be like totally fine. Like I don't need the seconds duration at the minute. Once it does get to less than 1 minute, it does start counting down like 59, 58, 57. But up until that point, it's just like 1 : dash dash, which is like the weirdest like thing to like see. So
I wonder if they can go lower than 1 hertz, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like half a hertz.
Refresh less than a second. I don't know.
I mean, again, like I totally get like maybe they can't show it once a second, so that's like fine. Just like what's with the dash dash? I don't. It doesn't make sense.
That's weird.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I'm glad to hear that you were liking it. That you're making regular phone calls on your phone, as it's meant to be. And yeah,
that's all it's used for. That's the only reason I have a smartphone.
One sole purpose, right? It's a phone with a bunch of apps on it, not a device with a phone app on it.
Yeah. I got thinking, like, I'm wondering, this is semi-unrelated, but I'm wondering if they're going to drop the I from iPhone, iPad, and everything. It feels old at this point, but I wonder if they're just, like, stuck to it. Like, I could totally see them just calling it, like, the Apple phone or something. I don't know. Like the Apple TV, or the Apple Pad, I guess? I don't know.
Yeah, the Apple, like, I get that, but at the same time, like, if they drop the I, then it's just a phone, and it's not a phone. Like, no one uses it as a phone.
That's true,
and
that's fair.
Phone, like, I don't think has migrated its meaning over completely to, like, a device that you use on the daily. Like, this is an extension of you. It's more than just a phone. Yeah. And Apple hit it out of the park when they had, like, a distinct name, like a Mac. Like, they made that up. There's nothing related to that, and they had a great name for a device that would define basically computing for almost everyone on Earth. And I don't think they did that when they named the iPhone. They're just going off the iPod craze. So, like, I don't think they can ever just... Yeah, they would need a complete new name that is completely separate, that the device would evolve into, right? Like, take the next, like, generation leap. It's probably when we'll leave it behind. Like, once we go to Apple Glasses, as bad as a name that is, like, that will probably be when we leave the iPhone behind, right? When we start getting everything here instead of here, that's when we are going to change things over, I think. Probably not anytime soon.
No, probably not. I think that ship sailed for now.
As always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter at CodeCompletion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to tweet at us if there's a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis, that's SpencerCurtis on Twitter, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol, that's DimitriBouniol, and we'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Thanks.